All right, once again, welcome to Parshas Beshalach, and we're starting with the very first pasuk of Beshalach, and we're going to see it on the screen right now. It says, "Vayihi Beshalach Paro es ha'am," and it was when Paro sent out the nation. Now, I mentioned that the Gemara in Megillah on Daf Yud makes a statement that Kol Mokom Shenemar Vayihi, wherever it says the word Vayihi, Eino Ela Lashon Tsar. It's only an expression of pain. That's what the Gemara says. Now, the fact of the matter is, the Gemara points out a number of instances where the word Vayihi does not reflect any Tsar. I don't have time to go show all that Gemara, but trust me, the Gemara in Daf Yud Amud Beis, if you want to take a look, you can look it up, and it says it's not necessarily a lashon of tsar. And so the Gemara ends up by saying, well, you're right, it doesn't always mean that, but it does mean that in many instances, specifically when it says be may. Okay, in our case, it doesn't say be may, but it hints to a lashon of tsar. The question, of course, is, what's the tsar over here? Paro is sending out the Jewish people. So why are you telling me it's Eino Ela Lashon Tsar? It's an expression of pain. What's the pain or what's the trouble with the expression Vayihi Beshalach Paro? So there are a number of approaches to this, and each and every one of them has its own unique ideology behind that approach. The first one we're going to go to is the approach of the Agra de Kala. The Agra de Kala was written by the Bnei Yissaschar. The Bnei Yissaschar, of course, was none other than Tzvi Elimelech of Dinav, based on the Sefer that he wrote. He was a Talmud. He was a Talmud of the Chose of Lublin, who we'll discuss a little bit later on. One of the great Hasidic masters. Anyway, in his commentary on the Torah, which is called the Bnei Yissaschar, he says, what was the lashon of tsar over here? And this is what he says. I'm going to read just a sentence or two of what he says is the lashon of tsar. He says, he quotes the Rashi in the name of the Sifrian Bamidbar, Sheshalach imahem gam es ha'erev rav. When it says that Vayihi Beshalach Paro es ha'am, he sent out the nation, es ha'am means with the nation. With the nation, he sent out the Erev Rav. He sent out those who weren't pure in their ideology with the Jewish people. They just wanted to be on the winning side. You know, when you want to just be on the winning side, as soon as you're going to be faced with any kind of difficulties whatsoever, it's going to cause a tremendous upheaval. And in fact, our Chazal tell us that when it came to the making of the Egel, the making of the golden calf, after all the miracles that the Jewish people saw over all that period of time, we have a few participants who want to join. So
I think you should mute everybody.
There's some background noise.
Okay, we'll try to mute everybody. Give me a moment. Let's try. Let's go. Let's see if we can go back. Do you hear me? Shake your head if you hear me.
Yes.
You hear me? Okay, good. So, Maya, can you speak and see if you're muted?
Do you hear me, Rabbi?
Yeah, I hear you. It's not. You're not unmuted. Okay. Let's see if we can get to
Stop
the
it. Stop video. Yeah. Okay.
Hold on. We're trying to get to the source to mute this. I'm not able to find it at this point. We'll have to go down here. Maybe it's going to come up over here. All right. It seems. Is it still making noise?
No. So make sure the person who's making noise stop it. That's all.
All right. Ask the person, whoever's making any noise, please stop it or mute yourself. I don't see the mute button for me over here.
Okay, David.
So you know, unfortunately, it's on the main screen, but I don't want to lose the share, so I'm not gonna go to the. Oh, wait a minute. Now I got it. Okay, now I can do it. Now I can do it. 1 minute. 1 minute. All right. Now I got it. All right. I'm muting everybody right now. Okay. All right, you're all muted. If you want to unmute, you're going to have to unmute yourself at this point. Okay, so now it says the Nineveh, the Bnei Yissaschar says he sent with them the Erev Rav, and as I mentioned, the Erev Rav was the cause of much disturbance for Klal Yisrael, because at the Egel they were the ones who were easily convinced that Moshe was not coming back, and so began the idea that the Egel was going to be a representative, even though, of course, it wasn't absolute idol worship, according to most of the commentaries on the Torah. But nevertheless, it was a form. And certainly those who got really deep into it, they were considered to be idol worshippers. And consequently, when it says, YIBE Beshalach Paro, it means that Paro sent with the nation much of the Erev Rav, and that caused tremendous tsar for the Jewish people. And consequently, Vayehi is a lashon of tsar. Now, there's another approach by Reb Tzadok HaKohen. Reb Tzadok HaKohen is famous for being one of the great Jewish Balei Musar. And Reb Tzadok HaKohen, of course, was a 19th century brilliant Talmud Chacham, and he was also from the city of Lublin, and he said the following, Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, he said, you know what the tsar was here? You know what the Vayehi was? The Vayehi was Beshalach Paro. That Paro sent them out. They didn't go willingly on their own. Paro pushed them out, so to speak. It was Paro who sent them out, not that they went on their own. We're going to see more of that as we go along in the Parsha. That's a tsar. That the Jewish people didn't want to go out on their own is a tsar. There are many today, especially those who are a Torah Zionist, and I use that expression very guardedly and pointedly, in fact, because the concept of a Zionist in and of itself is not something that a Torah personality would want to associate with, as the so-called Zionistic movement, which was devoid of Torah, is not something that we want to necessarily become part of. We do want to become part of those who love Eretz Yisrael. We have to be those who love Eretz Yisrael. We have to be those who fight for Eretz Yisrael. But the ideological Zionist idea was to get rid of the religious aspect. We're going to build a society, said the Zionists, which is going to be the new Jew. We won't need the Torah anymore. The persecution was caused, according to them, by the Torah. We're going to jettison the Torah, and we're going to be kechol hagoyim, like all the nations of the world. And that's not what we want to plug into, but a Torah Zionist, someone who loves the Torah and wants to fulfill the Torah and wants to go live in Eretz Yisrael because he or she loves the Torah. That's something that every one of us should desire from the depths of our soul. Each and every one of us should want basically to go home and to live where we belong. And I feel that, and I think every Jew should feel that we want to go home where we belong. We don't want to reside in the places that are not specifically our home. Consequently, we have to be so-called Zionists, and in the sense that a religious Zionist, a Torah Zionist, and Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin says that part of the problem was that Paro had to send us out, and that we didn't want to go on our own, as we're going to see as the psukim unfold. And then there's another expression by the Yalkut Shimoni, which is quoted by the Ma'ayonos Shel Torah, which was written by Rabbi Alexander Zusha Friedman. And he said, you know, the tsar of the Jewish people, of course, is that Paro ultimately did send us out. But what did he do after he sent us out? Did he say goodbye, good riddance, and that's it? Absolutely not. He came running after us to take us back into Egypt. He wanted to take us back into Egypt. And the Ma'ayonos Shel Torah, quoting the Yalkut Shimoni, says that, you know, he ran after us just like so many others in the history of the world. One of the things that the world has always done is, and the Chosa of Lublin quotes that and also makes a mention of it, is that one of the things the world does is they say the Jews are at fault for everything. It's all the Jews' fault. I mean, people who don't know any Jews, they never met a human being who's Jewish. Shakespeare might not have ever met a Jew in his life because the British had banished Jews from the land of England, in 1190. And in his time, medieval times, there probably never was a Jew. Yet he was able to write The Merchant of Venice, which according to many is an anti-Semitic screed. Why? Because there's this hatred and blaming the Jews for everything, anything and everything. Someone walks over to a Jew walking down the street because he's wearing Hasidic garb and he attacks him. Why? Doesn't know who he is. Doesn't know how charitable, how good, how he raises his children to have fear of God and respect for mankind, just because he's a Jew. And the nature of the anti-Semites and the haters of the Jews is that they cause this trouble for the Jewish people, and they tell them, go, get out of our land, and then they make it either impossible to leave. If the Nazis were so anti-Jewish and they didn't want Jews around, let them go. Let them get out. They didn't. They closed the borders. Because the nature is that there's this tremendous sorrow whenever the Jews are persecuted. And so the Parish here says that Beshalach was a prototype anti-Semitism in which he didn't want to send them out. He was forced to send them out. And it only caused trouble for the Jews because he ultimately came after them, as is the nature of so many others in the world. And then, of course, we have the concept that is brought down by the Chosa of Lublin, Levi Yitzchak Horowitz, who we mentioned before, and he mentions a very interesting thing. He said, if you'll take a look a little further, and we're going to do that right now, we're going to go into the next pasuk, and it says, "Vayasev Elokim es ha'am." After Paro sent them out, Hashem took the Jews around Derech HaMidbar, the path of the Midbar, Yamsuf. He took them out towards the Sea of Suf. Now, if you know the map of Israel and the Middle East, you know that the Sinai Peninsula has the Reed Sea on two sides, actually three sides. That's why it's a peninsula. It going towards Eretz Yisrael, there's a Sea of Suf, then the Sinai Peninsula, and then again the Sea of Suf, and back to Eretz Yisrael. So here it says Hashem took the Jews towards the Sea of Suf, and then it says, watch this, V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Yisrael. And the Jewish people went up chamushim. Now, the translation of chamushim is open for discussion. You'll see in the English over here, we have a footnote, by the way, interestingly enough. The translation of the Sepharia tells us, now the Israelites went up armed out of the land of Egypt. That's actually a statement by Rashi. If you take a look, we're going to go to a statement by Rashi right over here, and we're going to go to it right now. Here's the Rashi, okay? Without any pause, man, we managed to do that. Thank you, David Beck. So we are going to now take a look at the Rashi over here on this particular pasuk, which is also, what happened? That wasn't supposed to happen. Excuse me. I'm sorry that happened. We're going to try to get back to this. Give me a moment. I don't know why that happened. Okay, got to get out of here. Okay, let's get out of this one. And we're going to go to, here it is, Rashi on Exodus. Here it is. And it says here, Vachamushim. Look at the Rashi right over here. Do you see this? My pointer is on it. Vachamushim. Ein chamushim ela mizuyanim. Chamushim means armed. That's what chamushim means. And you'll see the translation over here. Chamushim, the word chamushim means provided with weapons. Quotes the Mechilta of Devei Rebbe Yishmael. Okay, so the Rashi here is making a statement that the Jewish people left mizuyanim. I want you to pay attention, please, to this particular word, mizuyanim. Okay, what's the root word of mizuyanim? So the root word of mizuyanim is zayin. Zayin means weapon. Clay zayin means weapons. We're going to discuss that for a moment. And in order to do that, I want you to be aware of something. If we take a look at this particular Gemara, it's a Gemara in Masechta Menachos on Daf Chav Tes Amud Beis. I believe it's Chav Tes Amud Beis, right? Yeah, it's Chav Tes Amud Beis, right? On Daf Chav Tes Amud Beis, there's a statement right over here by the Gemara. That's a very, very interesting statement, and it has to do with the concept that we're about to discuss, which has to do with the letters that are in the Sefer Torah, and that the pasuk over here said they went out mizuyanim. All right. So Rava makes a statement here on Chav Tes Amud Beis. I had it a moment ago, and then I moved it. So after we find it right over here, the Gemara says that there are 7 letters that demonstrate that they each have to have what is called a zayin. Here we go. Right here is the statement. All right. It says like this. Okay, here it is. Amar Rava. Okay, here follow the hand. It's Chav Tes Amud Beis in Menachos. Amar Rava. Rava says, Shiva Osios. There are 7 letters. Tzrichos Shlosha Ziyunim. They need 3 little crowns. 3 little ziyunim. The Eluhain. These are the 7 letters. You can remember this. Here are the 7 letters. Shin, Ayin, Tes, Nun, Zayin, Gimel, Tzadik, which spell out the word Shatnei's Gats. That's an easy way to remember. These 7 letters need ziyunim. Now, if you remember in the Rashi that we just quoted, it says that when Vachamushim Olu Bnei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim, that the Jewish people went up from Egypt by chamushim, it meant armed, mizuyanim, with weapons. Here, Rava is saying a very similar terminology when it comes to the letters of the Torah. The Jewish people went out mizuyanim. Now look here in the Tosfos over here is going to give us an example, a very interesting thing. Let's take a look at some of the letters that he's pointing out. Tosfos makes a mention. Here's the Tosfos in Masechta Menachos, Shatnei's Gats, Yesh Mefarshim, Gimel Ziyunim. What does Gimel Ziyunim mean? Right? They're on the left side, and some say it's in the middle, some say it's like a shin like this. But which letter does Tosfos use as the example here that stands out for us? We can see it as clear as day. Which letter does he use? He uses the letter Zayin. Zayin. We just said that the Jewish people left mizuyanim. They left armed with weapons. Do you see the Zayin over here that my pointer is going over? Look at the Zayin. It looks like a sword. Here's the point. Here's the handle. Mizuyanim. They went out with a Zayin. Now, if you take a look at every one of the 7 letters that Rava mentioned, you will notice, and I mentioned this in the Daf Yomi not long ago, you will notice that these 7 letters all have a Zayin in it. Take a look. Shin. One of the legs of the shin is a Zayin. Ayin. This leg of the ayin is a Zayin. Tes. The end leg over here of the tes is a Zayin. The nun, the leg is a Zayin. The tzadi, the leg is a Zayin. Even the gimel and the tzadik, the gimel also, the leg is a Zayin. Every one of these 7 letters has a Zayin, a weapon in it. What are the weapons of the Jewish people? the weapons of the Jewish people are the letters of the Torah. And so therefore, every letter that has a Zion in it gets a crown. If you'll open up a Sefer Torah, you'll take a look at it, you will see every one of these letters has these three crowns on the top. Shin, Ayin, Tesla, and Zion, they have the crowns. The Jewish people left armed. What's the armaments that the Jewish people had? The Jewish people's armaments were the words of the Torah. The prayers that they offered were their armaments. Those are the things that they left Egypt with. And therefore, they were able to be victorious when it came time. And so now we're going to get rid of this share, and we're going to go back to our other share, and we'll get to the original psukim that we were looking at, and we'll get to the Rashi, and we'll go back to the psukim themselves. So here are the psukim themselves. Oops. The psukim themselves, and we'll try to pick it up a little bit. Move it over a little bit if we can. Okay. So we'll go to the next pasuk. It says, "Vachamushim olu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim." The Jewish people left Mitzrayim with armaments, right? And the armaments, of course, were their prayers to Hashem. This is something that the Jewish people need to really sort of inculcate within themselves, that the real weapons of the Jewish people are the words of the Torah. I have a story about that, but it's not for today.
Rabbi Snow,
Yeah.
I have a question. Does Chamushim have anything to do with number 5?
Yes, we're going to bring that up.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to bring that up in a moment. All right. So, Chamushim, literally, according to the translation that we have over here, they went up armed. But Meyer, Roth, so beautifully, is pointing out the word Chumash. Chumash. Chumash means the
Right.
Torah. Why is Chumash called the Torah? Because there are 5 books of the Torah. So it's called Chumash. Chumash means Chamesh. 5. What does that have to do with this pasuk? Again, if you'll take a look at the Rashi on this, you'll see a startling thing, that the Rashi says that not all of them went out. If we have a chance to take a look at the Rashi right here, okay, we'll see the Rashi, okay. Does the Rashi say here? Yeah, he should say it. Okay, here it is, the end of the Rashi, last line, Davar Acher. Here it is, another interpretation. Chamushim, what does another interpretation of Chamushim mean? Echad mechamisha yatsu. 1 out of 5 left. 1 out of 5. Echad mechamisha yatsu. Va'arba chalakim, 4/5 of the Jewish people, mesu b'shloshes yemei afela. 4/5, Rashi's quoting the Mechilta, that fully 4/5 of the Jewish people did not go out. 1/5 went out. 4/5 did not.
So if
How many-
4/5 did not go out, I mean, stayed in Mitzrayim, why
They
did
died.
Paro- Yeah, but why did they died? Oh,
They died and were buried, as it says. Mesu b'shloshes yemei
but it
afela.
wouldn't make sense for Paro just to go after 1/5 of the people that left.
Well, they all died, so they were left with 1/5, right? How
Yeah.
many was that 1/5? 603,550
Oh,
men,
yeah.
right? There were 600,550 men. There were still 3 million people there. All right? But
Yeah.
imagine, that was 1/5. It would have been 15 million. 1/5 did not, was the one that went out. 4/5 did not. One of my chavrusas, who I used to learn with all the time, Rav Chaim Jachter, told me that he heard from Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik that this is something that applies in just about every single generation. That there are, well, not in every generation, but in many seasons of the Jewish people, in many happenings, 1/5 is there all the time. Well, unfortunately, there are times when 4/5 assimilate and disappear, and we're left with only 1/5. And if you want to be one of those 1/5, it's only because you keep the words of the Torah, because you have the Zion and you're connected with the weapons of the Torah. Now, there is a very interesting pasuk that is found previously in Parsha's Bo. I'm going to try to access that right now, because I'm going to go back a little bit and I'm going to show you an interesting pasuk. I spoke about it last Shabbos, okay? And here it is. It says in this pasuk, watch this. Umoshav b'nei Yisrael, and the dwelling. This is a Perik Yud Beis in let's see if we can move this whole thing over. Whoops, no. Let me get back to this. Trying to move the whole thing over a little bit. Okay, here it is. Okay, here is the pasuk. It's pasuk mem in Perik Yud Beis. Umoshav b'nei Yisrael, and the dwelling time of the Jewish people, the length of time that they stayed in Egypt, Asher Yoshev Mitzrayim, Shloshim Shana v'arba me'os Shana. How many years?
430.
430.
430 years. 430 years. Now, Bosai, every one of us knows that the Jewish
It was
people were
210.
210 years. Great. There you go.
Yeah.
210 years. And the slavery, how many years was the slavery? 86 years.
86 ghost.
86 years, a total of 86 out of 210 years. It only began after Levi died. So it's 86 years, right? And here it says there were 430 years.
It depends how far back you count from. That's
Well, but here it says, Umosha b'nei Yisrael, Asher Yoshev Mitzrayim.
At 1/5, 86.
Oh, Mordechai is onto something. There we go. Okay, I'm going to tell you over Gemara. We don't have time to. I didn't bring it up on the share because it's just a longer piece, but I'll tell you an interesting piece of Gemara. The Gemara is found in Sanhedrin on Daf Tzadik Aleph. You want to look it up? You can look it up. It's Tzadik Aleph Amud Aleph, I believe, and it says there that Alexander Mokdon, guess who he was? Alexander of Macedonia conquered the world, right?
Alexander the Great.
Alexander
Yeah.
the Great. There we go. Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great, because he conquered the world, he was able to sit in judgment on all the world's problems. And there were so many different nations that came to Alexander the Great in order to, make their case for one thing or another. So the Gemara tells us that the Egyptians came to Alexander the Great. And they came to Alexander the Great and they said, the Jewish people emptied out Egypt of all its wealth, all the gold, all the silver, all the wealth that the Egyptians had was taken by the Jews. And we want it back. We want it back. So we're coming to Alexander the Great and we're saying, please judge, and if they're at fault, make them pay. It's always, the Jews are at fault for something that happened, a few 100, 1,000 years ago, in Eila Ezkara that we read on Yom Kippur. So it says that the sages of the Romans came to the Roman emperor and said, the Jewish people sold their brother into slavery, and the punishment for selling a brother into slavery is death. And there were 10 great leaders that sold him into slavery. Let's kill the 10 greatest sages that exist. That, of course, is mentioned not only on Tisha B'Av, but also on Yom Kippur. It's mentioned on Yom Kippur. It's in the paragraph Eila Ezkira, right? And that is a litany of accusations against the Jewish people, which took place 2,000 years before, 1,000 years before, whatever. What are you doing here? So they came to Alexander the Great with the same thing. The Jewish people robbed us blind. So Alexander said, okay, I'm sending a letter to the Jews. He sent to the Jews, come and defend yourselves, because otherwise you're going to have to pay up. So the Jews didn't know what to do. So along came a man, his name was Gabiah ben Pesisa, the Gemara tells us. Gabiah ben Pesisa, in fact, the Gemara even mentions he was a little bit of a hunchback. Gabiah ben Pesisa comes to the sages and says, look, let me go answer Alexander the Great. If I win, you're running in great. A humpback defeated them. If I lose, then all you'll say is, look, you didn't ask the greatest sage of all. You talked to a lowly, fellow who wasn't even educated that much. You got nothing to lose. Let me go answer him. I think I can beat him in the debate. Okay. He goes and he comes before Alexander the Great and he says, tell me to the people who are claiming, Egyptians who are claiming, they want their money back. Where do you get this information that we stole your vessels? He said, what are you talking about? It says it in your Torah. It says it in your Bible, right? Because the Bible was translated, you see, and they knew it. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons why on Asara B'Teves we fast, because of that translation, because they got it all messed up. Anyway, so Alexander the Great, yes, he showed it to him. He said, you see, it says right here that when the Jews left Egypt, they emptied out Egypt from all the silver and vessel. They borrowed from the men, from the women, and so on. So you owe us the money. So he said to the Jews, what's your answer? So he says, well, I'll tell you what my answer is. It says here in the same Bible that we were slaves for 430 years, right? So there were 3 million people who they enslaved for 430 years. Give me back the wages of 3 million people for 430 years. So Alexander the Great said to them, hey, Egyptians, you have an answer to this? He said, give us 3 days to think it over. They thought it over. They couldn't go back with a good answer. It was known they didn't pay him. You want to quote the Bible? The Bible says he didn't give us anything. So they had no answer. So that was the end of the story. Okay, the Marsha asks the question, wait a minute. Why did Gabiya ben Pesisa say 3 million Jews for 430? Why did he say 600,000 Jews? That was his original claim, 600,000 Jews. Why did he say 600,000 Jews for 430 years? They weren't there 430 years. They were only there in 210. And enslaved, they were only enslaved 86 years. So if they're only enslaved 86 years, why did Gabiya ben Pesisa say they were enslaved for 430 years? So the Mashah leaves it as an interesting question. And Rav Meir Lehman of Mainz, famous Rav Meir Lehman, who wrote the Marcus Lehman Agada, he gives the following answer. He says, look, it's true, 600,000 Jews were not there for 430 years as slaves. They were only slaves for 86 years. But the pasuk we read tonight in Beshalach says that only 1/5 of the Jews left Egypt. So if the 600,000 was only 1/5, that means it was really 3 million. And if it was really 3 million, and they were there only 86 years, well, the payment is the same. 3 million people for 86 years is the same as 600,000 people for 430 years, because 86 times 5 is 430, and 600,000 times 5 is 3 million. So I was not wrong, says Gabiya ben Pesisa. I was on the mark. I said 600,000 for 430 years. Okay, they want to get angry at me and tell me it wasn't 600,000, and we weren't there 430 years, we're only there 86 years as slaves. Okay, but there were 3 million, because the pasuk says, only 1/5 left when they left Egypt. So that's the Gemara's answer in Sanhedrin, and that's why the 1/5 is a lot more than 1/5. Let's go on in our Sedra to get some more insight into some of the things that we're going to be speaking about, or that we should speak about in this week's Sedra. Okay, let's go on to the next pasuk. Vayikach Moshe es atzmos Yosef imo. When Moshe left, he made a promise, as the pasuk says. When he left, he took the bones of Yosef with him. Ki hashpeya hashpeya es bnei Yisrael, because Yosef made a promise. He made the Jews make a promise, Lamar, saying as follows: Kod yifkod Elokim eschem, a double expression. Hashem should surely remember you. Va'alisem, and when he remembers you, please, va'alisem es atzmosai mize etchem. Take my bones out of here with you. Now, the Medrash explains what were Yosef's bones doing in Mitzrayim? The Egyptians revered Yosef, and they recognized that Yosef brought tremendous blessing to the land of Egypt. They recognized it. Until he came, there was a prediction that there would be 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. But because of Yosef's taking care of the Egyptians and storing up the wealth of the 7 years, the famine did not affect the Egyptians. In fact, when Yosef's father and brothers came to Egypt, after 2 years, the famine stopped altogether. And when Yaakov went to the Nile rose up to greet him. And so Yosef was revered as being someone who brought great wealth and gift to Egypt. And they wanted to keep that wealth for themselves. And they wanted the Nile to overflow constantly because that's the irrigation that gives the crops in Egypt their ability to grow. Interesting, Rabosai. Yosef was buried in a coffin in the bottom of the Nile. And he was taken out with the coffin, according to the Medrash, when Moshe and the Jewish people left Egypt. His coffin was raised up and carried with them to Eretz Yisrael and ultimately buried in Shechem, which is the fulfillment of the prophecy that was mentioned in Vayechi. Yaakov said, I am giving you Shechem, and Shechem is where Yosef's kever is to this day. To this day, Yosef is still there, buried in Shechem, which of course is in the land of Ephraim, his son. It's in the territory of Yosef himself. Here, it tells us that Moshe took the Atzmos Yosef Imo. Okay, according to the Medrash, when it says that Yosef took the Atzmos Yosef with him, the word Atzmos means bones. Now, the word etzem, bone, comes from the word etzem, which means the essence of something. A bone is the hardest part of the human body. The skeleton, which is made up of the bone, supports the entire body. When bones are broken, God forbid, or when they deteriorate, God forbid, the body deteriorates because there's no support for the body. So the word etzem means itsumo shel davar, the essence of something. So the Mefarshim say, Vayikach Moshe es atzmos Yosef imo. Moshe took with him the essence of Yosef. He took the essence of what Yosef was. Because as a leader, he had to imbibe the essence of what Yosef was and take it with him. What was that essence of Yosef? What was it that made Yosef who he was and that made him so desired and so important to Moshe? So if you'll take a look back in Parshas Vayechi, at the end of Vayechi, and you'll remember, I'm not going to go read it here because it'll take too much time, but I'll tell you what happens. If you remember, at the end of Vayechi, the brothers come to Yosef and they say to him, listen, Yosef, you know, our father has died. He's no longer around. And we don't want you to in any way, shape, or form take any revenge. I'll read you the exact pasuk. It'll take a moment because it's right at the end of Vayechi. And you see the essence of the nature of what Yosef was all about. Because when they come to him worried that in some way he might in some way take revenge, impossible, said Yosef. Hasachas Elokim ani, and it's right before the end of the Sedja, and this is what the words say. Okay? It says like this. Vayelchu gam Echov vayiplu lefanav. His brothers come and they fall before him. Right before that, it says, "Kosom ruli Yosef." This is what they said to Yosef. Ono sono pesha achecha. Please forgive the sin of your brothers, v'chatosam, and the iniquity that they did to you, because they paid you back in a bad way. The brothers are contrite over the selling of Yosef. And now, please forgive the servants of the God of your father. And Yosef was speaking to them and crying. By Yomer Aleim Yosef. And Yosef said to them, now the brothers are very, very worried that now that their father has passed away, and Yosef has been so kind to them. You know, the Medrash says that every single day they used to eat with Yosef until Yaakov came, because he didn't want to take away the honor of Yaakov. But before Yaakov came, Yosef was their guardian. And now they're worried and they didn't get invited when Yaakov came. So then maybe he's plotting to take revenge on us. Yosef says, Al tiro ki asachas alakimani. But am I in God's place? Atem chashavtem alayra. V'atem chashavtem alayra. You thought to do bad to me, but Elokim chashav alatova. Hashem saw that all the bad you did to me was really good. So that we could be alive today. All that happened was for the best. And therefore, I have no grudges against you. Moshe is taking the leadership position of the Jewish people. In order to take a leadership position, you have to be like Yosef. You have to not be vengeful and not be angry at those who insult you, not be upset over someone who wrongs you. What you have to do is take the etzem of Yosef. You have to take the very essence of who he was and become a leader just like Yosef. You have to be someone who is able to rise above the pettiness and be someone who is able to lead the people with kindness and goodness, just like Yosef only paid good, even though they did him bad. Still, you have to rise above that. Okay, I want to tell you an interesting Maisa Shahaya. You know, the brothers are worried that Yosef is going to take revenge on them, and Yosef says, I'm not in God's stead. The leaders of the Jewish people have always been great in dealing with the non-Jewish world. When the leaders of the non-Jewish world and the leaders of the Jewish world get together, they plead, the Jewish leaders plead for the sake of the Jewish people. Rav Aaron Kotler, Zechayna Levracha, there's a famous story about Rav Aaron Kotler and his pleading on behalf of the Jewish people. Those who are interested, there's a biography of Rav Aaron, a whole beautiful sefer. It's a very long book and difficult reading at times, but it fleshes out some of the heroic efforts that he expended on behalf of the Jewish people. There was one particular incident in which Rav Aaron wanted to save the students of a yeshiva that had found refuge in Italy. They found refuge in Sicily and Italy, and they needed to get out from under the hands of the Nazis, who, of course, were in cahoots with the Italians, you know, at that time, and he needed to save these Jews. So Rav Aaron Kotler heard that there is a great Italian leader in the United States of America who has tremendous clout in Italy and Sicily. He was known as the Mafia Don. He was the leader of the Mafia. And he has tremendous clout and power. So Rav Aaron told Irving Bunim, who was his go-to man, he said, get me an appointment with the Godfather. I want to go speak to him. So Irving Bunim said, well, you want me to make an appointment with the head of the Mafia? What are you kidding? How am I going to do that? He says, I don't care how you're going to do it. Just get it done. You can speak and get me that appointment. So Irving Bunim went and he did everything he could He pulled every string he could. All the people he knew in the real estate world, in the money world, he was a very well-known figure. And he finally managed to get himself an appointment with the Godfather. And the appointment was to be held in Bensonhurst, where at that time they hung out.
Yeah.
And a car came to pick up the Rosh Hashiva and Mr. Bunin, and they came to the Mafia Don's house in Bensonhurst. And as soon as they pull up, a whole bunch of big strapping guys open the doors of the car. They look inside, and they see Rabbi Rav Aaron Kotler and Mr. Bunim and the driver. And Mr. Bunim and Rav Aaron Kotler get out. They frisk him, of course, and they welcome them into this palace of the mafia leader. And after going through this door and that door and this door and that, finally they come face to face with this very austere-looking gentleman with a big cigar behind a big desk, covered in gold and so on and so forth. And he says, "Hey, Rabbi, I hear you're the godfather of the Jews. Is that true?" So Irving Bunim, tells Rav Aaron what he said. He said, "El Zokta is as du bist the Melech HaMashiach from the Yidden." So Rav Aaron Kotler said, "Okay, tell him okay, whatever." So he says, "Okay, what can I do for you?" And Rav Aaron starts crying. And he says in Yiddish, he says, "You got to save all the yeshiva that's there. I hear you can do it. It's in your hands. You've got to be able to do this. You will be saving so many innocent people from death. You've got to do everything in your power to accomplish this." He was crying his head off and speaking in Yiddish. And the Godfather didn't understand a word he said. But he says to Mr. Bunim, "Listen, I don't know what he was talking about, but whatever it is, he really meant it. Tell me what he said, it word for word. I want to know what he said." So Irving Bunim translated it for him. So the Godfather says to Irving Bunim, he says, "Ask him what kind of blessing he'll give me if I accomplish this." So Aaron Kotler thinks for a minute, and he says, "Tell him I bless him. He should die in his own bed." The Godfather thinks for a minute, and he says, "That's the best blessing you can give to someone in my business." Because most of them don't get the chance to do that. "I'm going to do it. I'll get them out. You keep your promise about the blessing." And he did. And the Godfather at that time, I don't remember what his name was right now, but he did die of old age in his own bed. Interestingly enough, 30 years later, 40 years later, I don't remember the exact number, it's written up. One day, a few limousines pull up in front of Lakewood Yeshiva. Rav Aaron had long ago passed away. A bunch of goons get out of the car. They open it up, and the son of that Godfather gets out, and he says, "I want to see Rabbi Kotler." So they took him in. At that time, it was Reb Shneir, I believe it was Reb Shneir Kotler. And he said, "What can I do for you, sir?" He said, "Your father gave my father a blessing, and it came true. I want you to give me the same blessing." Now, it's not easy to refuse the Godfather of the time. But Reb Shneir said to him, "I'm sorry, sir, to tell you, I am not my father. My father had awesome powers. My father was the holiest of the holy. I am not. I'm just an average Joe. And I can't guarantee you that blessing. But I do wish you well. And I give you all the blessings I can, but I can't guarantee anything because I'm not my father." He was disappointed, but he understood. And he left. Here we see what it means to take Atzmos Yosef. You take the past with you. If you are capable of being a leader, you have to have the ideology that Yosef had, if possible. And you need to take it with you, because the leaders of the Jewish people have to be emulating the leaders of our past. We want to be like Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. We want to be like those who were the leaders of the Jewish people at all times. And in order for us to do that, we have to strive to be just like them in the same ways that they brought about salvation for the Jewish people. We have to do everything we can to bring about that salvation. And Moshe recognized that one of the other issues that Yosef had, that Moshe felt the Jewish people are going to need and that he needed to take with him, was the fortitude that Yosef HaTzadik had of being in an alien environment and maintaining his Torah ideology. To be able to go to a distant land and be alone and not succumb to the temptations of the society at large, that is the greatest level you can reach. And Moshe Rabbeinu had to take that with him to give that over as part of the Torah to the Jewish people, that we need to maintain our distinct identity and not give in, despite the fact that we're very often underneath the ruling power of the nations at large. There's so much more in this parsha, including the miracle, of course, of the splitting of the Yam Suf and the man. The first paragraph of Berchas Hamazon was written by Moshe Rabbeinu on the advent of the man. Hazones olam kulo betuvo b'chein b'chesed u'berachamim. The man was an awesome miracle. It's the most prevalent miracle in the history of the Jewish people. It took place every single day and twice on Friday, a double portion, which we still copy today by putting 2 challahs on the table for each meal of Shabbos, a double portion. We cover it over with a tablecloth underneath and a covering, a challah cover above, just like the man was covered beneath by the dew and above by the dew. And consequently, we have many references to the miracle of the man, which was every single day for 40 years, day in and day out, the most prevalent, most common miracle in the history of the Jewish people on a regular basis. And it symbolizes all the miracles that are with us on a constant basis. The miracle of sight, the miracle of breathing, the miracle of walking, the miracle of taste. Can you imagine? Hashem could have made it that each and every one of us eats when we're hungry and no taste. He could have put like a gas gauge in our mind, empty and full. When it goes empty, we go to a feeding station, we open our mouth, they put a nozzle in, they press till you get to full. When you're full, you go to work and that's it. Hashem didn't do that. He gave us all the flavors and all the tastes, all the gifts of taste and feeling good about the food that we're eating. This is one of the great miracles. Every single day, the man felt to taste like whatever you want. This is one of the great miracles of the Jewish people. And of course, that's also in this week's Sedge. I wish we had more time to discuss those things, but really, unfortunately, our time is up. I want to wish everyone an awesomely wonderful Shabbos. By the way, halacha l'maisa, you're allowed to feed the birds on Friday, but you're not allowed to put the bird crumbs out on Shabbos. Because the birds are not that's what we're learning in the Masechta Shabbos right now. The birds are not our responsibility to feel; they're not ours, and therefore we don't put out food on Shabbos. But we do put it out on Shabbos Shira on Erev Shabbos, and that's also a sign of Hakaras Hatov, which is another story in and of itself. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone.
Rebbe.
We'll take questions.
I just want to ask the Rebbe one thing. Can the Rebbe give us all a bracha? Your Reb Moshe's,
I want to tell you something. Hold it, Reb Beryl.
or all of us.
Okay, hold on. Listen carefully. I want to tell you something. Reb Moshe was very often asked for brachas. And one time, he told his Talmidim, he said, I don't know why they ask me for brachas. I'm not a Rebbe. I don't give out brachas. I don't know why they ask me for brachas. But I'll tell you something. If they're asking me for a bracha, it means they need it. If they need it, I say to them, what kind of bracha do you want? And they tell me, I want a bracha for Parnasa, I want a bracha for children, I want a bracha for shidduch, I want a bracha for health, whatever it is. And I bless them with what they want. And I say, Hashem should grant you what you want and what you need. And that's the bracha Rav Moshe used to give. And I want to tell you, I told this story in the Daf Yomi Shiur the other day, and I'll tell it to you now. I was once in Yerushalayim, Iraq Kodesh. Oh, it goes back 25 or more years ago when I've been there since then, of course, many times. But I was there that time. My wife and I were walking in Sharei Chesed, the neighborhood of the Groshul, and of some very, very great Talmidei Chachamim. In fact, at that time, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zal was living in Sharei Chesed. And I wanted to go daven mincha in the Groshul. And I'm about to walk into the Groshul to daven mincha, and the door opens, and out comes Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was coming out of shul, and I said to my wife, I'm not going to mincha now. I have plenty of time. It's early in the afternoon. I'll go later. I want to get a bracha from Reb Shlomo Zalman. So I went, and now you got to picture this. I was not wearing a suit. It was hot in the summer. I was wearing a shirt sleeve shirt, right? Right. And wearing a pair of regular pants, right? I got a tote bag over my shoulder because you got to carry Europe with you whenever you go away from home. You have to carry enough to last you for the next 20 days. So we had a shoulder bag with me, and I'm walking, and I had a camera. My wife and I had cameras at that time. We didn't have cell phones with cameras, so I had a camera, and I come over to Reb Shlomo Zalman. I caught up with him right by the gate of his house because he was surrounded by Talmidim. I caught up with Reb Shlomo Zalman. And I felt if now or never. So I pushed my way in a little bit gently, and I stuck out my hand. And Reb Shlomo Zalman saw me. He took my hand, and he said Shalom Aleichem. I said Aleichem Shalom Rebbe, and I spoke to him in Yiddish. And I said, the Rosh Yeshiva can give an bracha. Maybe Reb Shlomo Zalman, maybe you can give me a bracha. So Reb Shlomo Zalman, he's holding my hand all this time. He looks at me. He takes a step back, smiles his 10,000 watt smile, and he says, "Was für a bracha willst du? What kind of bracha do you want?" He says to me. So I said, I thought fast, and I said, "Ich will a bracha, ich soll matzliach sein in lernen. I want a bracha, I should be successful in my learning." So Reb Shlomo Zalman looks at me, and he says to me, "Und eine andere Sache nicht? You don't want hatzlacha with other things also?" I said, no. I want, pour it on, I'll take a bracha for whatever you can give me. So he smiles at me, and he gives me this tremendous bracha. And then he sees that my wife has a camera. And he says to me, "You wilt nemen a bild? You want to take a picture?" I said, "Yeah." He puts his arm around me, gives up his big smile, looks at my wife and says, "Okay, I have that picture. I have that picture with Reb Shlomo Zalman. I could probably get it for you and show it to you at some point, but I have that picture." And why? Because he asked me the same thing Reb Moshe asked all the time. What kind of bracha do you want? So Rebbe asked, he'd like a bracha. So was for a bracha will?
Not only me, the whole oilam.
You made the request.
Okay, so I'm telling you now.
We should
Hashem-
be mitzliach.
Hashem Yimalech
Right.
Mishalos Libecha L'Taiva.
Amen.
Kodesh Baruch Hu should grant all that you desire for good.
Amen.
Yimalech Mishalos Secha L'Taiva. That's all. HaKadosh Baruch Hu
Amen.
should bless you
Amen.
for good. I am not a Rebbe. I don't have the power.
Well,
to give
I can speak for myself. I hold the Rebbe for Rebbe.
wait a minute, the battle. I'm gonna wait. The battle.
You want a kvittel? I'll give you a kvittel.
No, you can give me a kvittel. Forget the kvittel. Give me what goes with the kvittel.
The opinion.
Because
By the way, Rebbe,
I'm only
one
kidding.
quick question. How is the Rebbe's student, the one who had the surgery?
What'd you say? Oh,
How-
I spoke. You see what brachas can do? I gave him a bracha for a Shlema. One of our choshev balabatim had a heart transplant on Sunday. He had a heart transplant on Sunday. I spoke to him tonight by the phone.
Oh, Baruch Hashem.
He's doing great. He's still
Rabbi,
in- he's still
Rabbi.
in danger, but he's doing great.
Rabbi,
Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
du kannst hören mich, ich verstehe, das verstehe mir, du kannst verhören.
Yeah, I hear
Rabbi,
Yeah,
you.
sure.
I hear
the
you.
name of the mafia, it's a true story, the name of the mafia guy was Joe Bonanno, and he
Who's
died in
speaking? Who's speaking?
Yosef Shalom, base Kuf,
Okay,
David Beck, Tata.
okay, good.
If that,
Yeah. So
Then,
the name of him was Joseph Bonanno?
yeah, and he died in Tucson, Arizona, in bed.
Yep.
And the
It's
rest
a
of
true
the
story. I
story,
know.
Wait,
It's a true
it
story.
was gunned down?
No,
this is
no.
true
he
story.
died of
No,
old
I
age.
died natural course.
Natural
Okay.
causes of old age.
Okay.
Of old age.
you don't retire from the mafia. They keep you as long as you could go. Otherwise, they put you to sleep for themselves. But his
Right.
son asked the Rebbe's son for bracha, and he said, "I'm not my father," and the son wound up in prison.
Yep.
That's a true story.
It's a true story. Yeah, it's well known.
Yeah.
It's a documented story. Yeah.
Joseph
Yeah.
If you call him
Banana?
Mr. Beck, Hashem should grant you long, healthy life at Me'ev Esim and
Amen.
Amen.
Joseph
continue
Banana?
Amen.
to join with us.
We can give it. They can give in their bracha, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Give us all.
Okay, Yesimcha Elohim Kefraim V'Kimenasher Yevarecha Adonai V'Yishmerecha Ye'er Adonai Ponavelecha V'Yunekwa Yisa Adonai Ponavelecha V'Yosem Lecho Shalom.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
A
Mr.
good
Beck.
Shabbos,
Good
everybody.
Shabbos. Thank you
Good
so
Shabbos.
much. for that
And you should be
beautiful
gesund
bracha.
stark.
Wow, what a
Amen.
beautiful bracha.
Gesehen
Amen.
stark.
Yeah,
Yiddish.
now,
Look on
HaKadosh-
it. Do you know
HaKadosh
the
Baruch
joke?
Hu, I'm gonna ask you one
Yiddish.
favor, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I hope you're on this Zoom.
Yeah, you know the joke, Rabbi.
No, go ahead.
Zugunish, Red Yiddish.
Yeah.
That's
a
so
cut.
old. That's so
That's a
old.
cut. And now I
Yeah.
know where David gets a sense of humor. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
You know
Yeah.
the other old one. Mein Zin, mein Einiglich. They sichen a medal was a PhD G
Papa
These
has
were-
dough.
Geld.
PhD. Yeah, Papa has dough.
Okay.
Mr. Kayach, Mr. Beck. And
Thank you.
Your
Thank
children
you.
should be a source of nachas for you. And your grandchildren too.
Thank you very
You're
much,
welcome.
Rabbi.
Thank you so much for
That's-
joining.
That is a bracha. Also, I know
It's a great bracha. It's a great bracha.
I
And
have
Mr. David, Mr. Beck's
yes.
son, David Beck, is the
Yes, sir.
president of our shul. Mr.
I know,
Joseph
yes.
Beck's son is
Yeah.
David Beck, and he is the president of our shul. We owe a lot of thanks for the
Yeah, yeah.
tremendous work that he does. You should know your son is a backbone of the shul. Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, have a good Shabbos,
Have a good
everybody.
Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Pleasure to meet
Thank
you.
you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We'll have a great Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, Rebbe.
Shabbos.
Good
It's great
Shabbos,
to have
Rebbe.
it. It's-
Tomorrow
it's-
morning.
Tomorrow morning, the daf begins. Moed
Moed
Katan tomorrow morning.
Hey,
Everyone's
listen,
invited to join. By the way, it's on Zoom too, 7
Hey,
o'clock in the morning.
excuse me, forgive me. Are there any women listening
On the
in?
Zoom.
I
a
have to
woman-
give the women a bracha. I can't just give the
No,
men.
That is
No,
okay.
no,
we
gave-
had,
you gave the
no,
women
we
a
had
bracha,
women
of
on
course.
the.
Huh?
And I'll call you later.
Wait a minute. Can I give the women? Yes.
No.
Yeah, you can give the women.
Sure.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, you see me, Elohim, Kisarav, Rachel, Valea. Yevarecha Adonai, V'yishmarecha. Ye'er Adonai, Ponavelecha, V'yunekwa.
Let's see if
Yisa
that's his
Adonai,
hands up. He
Ponavelecha,
has his hands
V'yosem Lecho Shalom.
Amen.
Amen.
You
Thank
gotta
you,
give it, you have to give it with feeling and to really mean it. That's another,
Amen. Amen.
that's
Thank
another,
you so much.
that's
Yes,
from another rabbi. So you better say it with meaning and feeling and really mean it. I said, yes,
Thank you
yes,
so
Rabbi.
much. Thank
Yes,
you.
Rabbi. I hope to see you before next week. I'll be listening
Yes,
to your share. And,
Okay, good.
Okay, Zag is in. Zag is
Keep-
in.
Okay.
yeah,
Good
Zabik
night.
is in.
Zabik is in.
Gesehen,
A good
Zabik
Shabbos.
and keep
Thank-
coming back, everybody.
Amen. Amen. Have a good
Amen.
Shabbos.
Hey,
everybody.
Vesper. Okay.
Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos.
Okay.